As I sat there months ago, I thought back on choices I made years ago when I was still working in Canada. I was living in Toronto and struggling with thoughts and feelings that go even further back. Then one day I decided it was time for a change. So I took off. The next thing I knew, I was traveling the world one country at a time. Then after a couple years of exploring the world by land, I started to explore it by sea. I got a job with a cruise line and spent 3 years working on the ocean, meeting coworkers that would become friends, friends that would become hookups, hookups that would become romantic partners, and romantic partners that would eventually become heartbreak. All while working 70 hours a week and spending most evenings in the crew bar. Then COVID hit. Just like that, the cruise industry shut down. Not just that, the entire world shut down. And there I sat, quarantined at my parents' house for months. Single, unemployed, and turning 32. I felt lost and depressed, like life had become completely pointless. Even worse, I had no idea how to get better. All I knew is that it wasn't from sitting still. So I decided to take off again. I bought a used 2012 Honda Odyssey and turned it into a bedroom on wheels. If you can get by with the basics, it can be done surprisingly cheap, especially if you use your dad for free labor.
Some people walked by, so I said hi. Then I got high. Said, hey, yellow ball in the sky, how should I pass my time?
Once I had the basics, I added in some extra amenities.
Never sent to my name, but I can show you the dime. I got all this time to kill, so don't throw me the lifeline. I said my day goes on and on. My mind's at ease when the day is done. Instead of hurrying away, you beat your jury for.
From there, all I needed was a destination. And during a time of border restrictions all over the world, the best destination I could think of while remaining in the true north strong and free is the true north. The Arctic Ocean at the northernest part of mainland Canada. When you're feeling directionless in life, you can't have a more specific direction than that. Straight north. At the end of the road, or so my Google search taught me, was a town called Tuktoyaktuk in Northwest Territories, and a sign that said Arctic Ocean. 6,767 kilometers away. That's where I was hoping my journey would end. My goal was to jump into that freezing cold water and come out renewed. The problem was, the Northern Territories were still closed to visitors. But that wasn't going to delay my trip. I figured I'd take off and drive as far as I could before being told I couldn't go any further. And when you need a start date for an epic journey across Canada, I could think of no better date than July 1st. Canada Day.
Trains bound for glory. So what's your story now?
The current mileage of my journey? 0 kilometers. After one final load of laundry at my parents' place, I threw my suitcase in the van and started driving. My journey had begun.
So what's your story? This train's bound for glory. This train's bound for glory. This train's bound for glory.
My first night was in Parry Sound in cottage country, where I found a nice local beach I could park my van. The COVID guidelines didn't say anything about no camping, and the hippie smoking pot in the camper van next to me was a pretty clear indication that I wouldn't have any problems. Although it was Canada Day, I decided to take it easy. Watch the sunset, drink a bit of whiskey, and get some sleep. There would be plenty of time for adventures later. Right now, I just wanted to adjust to life in a van. By the time I woke up, the parking lot was empty and I had the beach all to myself. This was great because it made cleaning myself far less awkward. Not so much for me, but for everyone else. In case you're wondering, that's biodegradable soap. It's made from goat's milk. Doesn't sound like it, but it really gets the job done, especially when you get right up in there. The second night I stayed somewhere my friend told me was worth spending a week. Lake Superior Provincial Park. Although it was sunny when I first arrived, it wasn't long before the fog started rolling in, which was fine, because I needed some time to think, and after a couple drinks, I started to share those thoughts. When I was a teenager, I fell into this really severe depression. It was, I don't know, it was hard to describe. It was like I wasn't there anymore. My head was heavy. There was something clogging it. My vision almost felt blurry at times. But yet I would go to school every day and just pretend like it didn't exist. And I didn't tell anyone for the longest time. I even started cutting myself, and I still didn't tell anyone for the longest time. And I eventually got on pills, and I eventually saw a psychiatrist, and it helped a little. It didn't hurt, but what really helped was when I went out to Lake Louise. I worked at a resort job in the Canadian Rockies, and I was separate from everything back home. Not that my friends or my family had anything to do with it. I went out on my own, and I got to really just find happiness on my own terms, like completely free of expectation. And it was this amazing year. It's when I met my ex-boyfriend, and that was a big part of my struggles. I'm not gay, I'm not straight, I don't really like to define myself as bi, but there was this constant question of who was I, and I couldn't answer it back home because I kept feeling I had to act like a certain way. And when I finally went out to Lake Louise and worked at a resort for the summer, I was able to explore that part of myself, and in doing so, it didn't scare me anymore. So I could go home, I told everyone about it, and in the long run, I don't know, I don't really know how to define myself. All I know is it led to me being proud and happy to say, look, I love who I love, and I'm happy with who I am, and I'm just going to live my life. Now, I don't know what I'm looking for as an answer anymore. I don't know what my question is at this point. I think that's the challenge. Maybe I am just looking for love again, but it's not in the same way. I think there's just some piece of myself that I'm missing, that I need to figure out before I could have, a relationship again that actually means something to me, and before I could have, my career actually go back to that level where I felt passionate about it. I had a really fucked up breakup earlier this year, and I won't go into details. I mean, I could play the blame game, but it's not even the point. It's just, I really had jumped in with both my feet, and I was just like really head over heels love with this girl. And I don't know, I thought maybe it was my issues from past relationships, because I've had, that story about Lake Louise that didn't turn out well in the long run, but I thought maybe, I don't know, I thought I'd really found the love of my life, and someone I was going to spend my life with, and then incident after incident made me realize that this was just, I was in love with the idea of being in love, and that this girl, as much as she said she wanted to spend her life with me, I could tell that was never going to happen, and it played out in a way that, I think that will stick with me for a while. And I found out it just kind of all fell apart right before quarantine and COVID kicked in, so I've had nothing but my thoughts for the last few months, and now I'm really hoping that if I can get out of my head a bit more, if I can surround myself with nature and new people and old friends that I can meet along the way and reconnect with, if I can stop this constant fucking loop that my head has been on, replaying the same conversations and arguments and just incidents over and over again, even though I don't even know, there's no more resolution to gain. I don't know what I'm hoping with it, but I don't know, my head is just stuck. It's been stuck on a loop. And I'm hoping that this trip will break it. And yeah, and as soon as I feel like I can stop thinking these same thoughts, that my mind will finally be open to the next step in my life. Because right now I'm on pause. When COVID kicked in and the world shut down, it wasn't just putting a pause to okay, close down these stores for a bit, close down bars for a bit. It was my whole, I don't know, by everything lining up at that exact point. My life just got hit on pause at a point in my life where I was just not where I wanted to be. And I can't expect the world to change or anything to accommodate me and to get me back where I want to be. I have to take control of that myself. So that is why I got the van. That is why I'm heading straight north. Eventually, once again, I'm still subject to borders open up, but I feel if I can just make it to the Arctic Ocean, if it takes me a month or two, doesn't matter. If I can just jump in that water, I don't know, I think I'll just feel like I'll be reborn again. That's the hope, at least. Then I can make my way back, then move on with my life. No, even better, I can not even move on, I can move up, move forward, move anywhere with my life. And yeah, it's exciting. I just need to get this screwed back on properly first. So it's hard to articulate some of these thoughts sometimes. They're just things that are in my head, but yeah. My depression and anxiety comes and goes, but I long since learned a healthy body is the best path to a healthy mind. That's what my third day was all about. It started with a healthy, van-friendly breakfast. Banana. Spoonful of peanut butter. Handful of muesli. After breakfast, I busted out my exercise bands and turned the forest into my own personal gym. After my workout, I wanted to get deeper into nature, so I found a hiking trail that I had all to myself. The payoff was when I got to a clearing that looked out over Lake Superior. That was the perfect spot to relax, have a bite to eat, and feel free. Freedom. I ended the day watching the sunset by the lake, before getting lost in a fire. I woke up the next morning feeling great. Rested, relaxed, comfortable. There was only one problem. The showers at the campsite were closed due to COVID. Luckily, I was prepared for that. The next day I continued driving along Lake Superior until I arrived at another provincial park, Sleeping Giant, named due to the resemblance of a giant sleeping on its back. I found an empty lot to park my van for the night, which conveniently had a toilet, because that can get interesting. After my nutritious beef jerky dinner, I went for a swim. I would later find out that was right next to a dirty diaper. Yeah, it was gross. I didn't get the best night's sleep there. It was insanely hot, and I was covered in mosquito bites the next morning. Nonetheless, it was time to hit the open road again. That night I stayed in Kenora on Lake of the Woods. It would be my last stop in my home province of Ontario, and it was a place I'd never even heard of before. But that's one of the most magical things about traveling. Up until that point, I was still really struggling with my thoughts, especially that day having not slept the night before. I felt off. Then I ended up at this picturesque little town on this giant lake that borders Canada and the US and has close to 15,000 islands. I went to a bar where they told me they were going to close the patio because it was raining and no one was out there, but I convinced them to change their mind. I think it was out of pity because I had nowhere else to go, but I ended up sitting out in the rain and enjoying a local beer with a couple random girls who showed up. Shortly afterwards, the rain stopped and the sky cleared. All of a sudden the patio filled, and even though absolutely nothing particularly exciting happened, it was exactly where I wanted to be at that moment. Sitting by the lake, drinking a local beer, with the setting sun shining on my face. I felt at peace. Even better, I became friendly with the staff, so they let me spend the night sleeping in their parking lot. That was a great final night to myself, before having to make a 10-hour drive to my buddy's ranch in Saskatoon the following day. The main challenge here wasn't so much the distance, but the fact that I couldn't stop. Manitoba was still shut down due to COVID, and to enter the province required you to self-isolate for 14 days. Or in my case, drive straight through. Luckily, I had myself to keep me company. Man, this is a long drive. 10 hours, no stopping. Actually, I'm going to admit a little secret to you. I did take a shit in a roadside stop. Probably broke some sort of COVID law. Shh. It was either that or shit my pants. And you know what? Looking at the toilet, I think there's more chance of me catching gonorrhea from it than there is a chance of me spreading COVID. So there's that. Manitoba is super flat. It's like a pancake. But not like a fluffy pancake. More like a crepe. But like a plain crepe. Not like a crepe with like strawberries or anything, because then that'd be bumpy again. Just a plain, flat crepe. It's super yellow everywhere. It's like as if God didn't drink enough water and then took a piss. I don't really believe in God, but if he existed and he had a pee, it was on Manitoba. We arrived in the Great Plains of Canada. Simpsons reference. Fun fact about glasses, they actually help you see, unless there's someone else's glasses, in which case they don't. So I'm on my way to Saskatoon. I really can't think of a more Canadian sounding town, to be honest. Saskatoon. I'm on my way to Saskatoon there. Oh, you're from Saskatoon. It's a Saskatoonie. Saskatoonian. I don't know what they're called. Saskatoonian? Let's go with Saskatoonian. After 10 hours, I made it to Christian's ranch. Christian and I worked on shifts together before the industry shut down. He was the music manager and drummer in the band. He's also a good friend and a really great guy. Prior to meeting up, he had been road tripping himself, driving his car from California to Saskatoon. That's how we started talking again. He posted this video on Facebook, and I reached out. After a quick catch-up, it turned out he had a few music gigs on Vancouver Island and needed to head west right around the time I would be passing through. Since the Northern Territory still weren't open, I thought, screw it. Let's become a groupie and follow my buddy around to his shows. Plus, I got to experience a couple days of ranch life first. I watched Christian work in his music studio basement and record some tracks. I even got to jam on a sweet bass for a bit. He then taught me how to draw. It's magic. That's art.
I mean, just like fix that up real quick. Alright, just a little bit more.
I mean, that just puts everything in perspective.
Yeah, exactly. There. Oh wait, this one's a little bit off too. Let me just wipe that off a little bit.
We worked out together outside, or whatever you want to call it.
All good. I like how you're just blazing while you're doing this. I mean,
He then gave me a COVID-friendly shower, because I wasn't allowed to use the one inside.
yeah. All right, that'll do. That'll do, Duncan.
I then got to experience true ranch life. And no, I don't mean this. I mean this.
Should I be worried about my eyes?
Another van and more lonely roads, another deadhead. Another dull hotel room and another cold bed. All for all that she said. I know I chose this driving life. Yes! With the white, but I don't wanna be the lone man. No, I don't wanna be the lone man. Well, maybe that's the way love goes, so I'm on to the next show, but I don't wanna be the lone man. Another gig and more pretty.
After a couple days on the ranch, Christian had taught me world-renowned Saskatoonian hospitality.
Yeah, I didn't even know how to shoot a pellet gun before this.
You know what? We'll make a marksman out of you.
Yeah, awesome. This was actually a very genuinely Canadian experience. I don't think we could have been more Saskatchewan than we've been getting. So
We didn't have poutine.
we didn't have poutine yet, but you have to come to my part of the
That's true, that's
part
true,
of the list for that.
Yeah.
This was about having fires and shooting cans.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And stray cats.
and stray cats. Yeah, and loud dogs. No, it's been cool. So we're about to hit the road. We're heading to Calgary, then heading to the mountains and heading to the islands. Taking this guy to a couple gigs. Pretty much what am I? Am I a roadie? Am I a groupie?
You're a tour bus roadie.
I'm a tour bus roadie. Does that involve any sexual favors, or
It depends.
it depends how cold it gets at night?
It's a very malleable job description.
Yeah. We got a couple weeks on the road together. It's gonna be exciting. It's gonna teach me all about philosophy and vision quest and looking
Yeah.
inwards. And
Yeah.
what are you gonna teach me?
I don't know. It depends what you need to learn.
A lot, and I'm sure I could teach you. I don't know.
I'm all for
I got
training.
nothing.
Yeah.
I got nothing. We're gonna hike a mountain.
Yeah.
That's where we'll learn how to survive.
And like that, Christian and I were off on our adventure together, which didn't just mean having a co-pilot, but a co-cameraman as well.
I don't wanna be the lone man. No, I don't wanna be the lone man. Maybe that's the way love goes, so I'm on to the next show, but I don't wanna be the lone man. Lone man. No, I don't wanna be the lone man. No, I don't wanna be the lone man.
When we got to Calgary, we met up with Erin, one of my best friends from high school, who I last saw when we road tripped together in Transylvania. She would play a major role in the story, even though it didn't seem so at the time. I was out with her and her boyfriend having drinks when she introduced me to a random local guy. That's how Trent came into the picture. I told him I was just passing through, and he asked what I was up to while I was in town. Which at that point, I was planning on rafting down the Bow River with Christian, Erin, and her boyfriend the next day. Turns out, that was one of Trent's favorite things to do in Calgary, and he had a raft. I asked him if he wanted to join, and he was up for it, which was pretty cool. When the time came to go rafting the next day, though, all my friends had to cancel for various reasons, so it ended up just being the two of us. Having never met before, we spent our first date floating down a river, drinking beers in the heart of Calgary. Afterwards, we went to his place, had a drink, talked, yada yada yada, played some Mario Kart, and then I said goodbye. It wouldn't be the last time I'd see him, but that's a story for a bit later. After a few days in Calgary catching up with friends, Christian and I were back on the road saying goodbye to the prairies and hello to the mountains. There's almost nothing like it in the world, where the Great Plains of Canada that take 15 hours to drive across finally come to an end and these giant rocky mountains now stand in front of you. At some points you even pass through what used to be a mountain. Literally, a giant unmovable rock that stood for 60 million years. Then about 60 years ago or whatever, Canadians were like, screw this, I'm not walking around. Blew it up and put a highway right through it. Whatever environmental thoughts you might have on that, it's pretty crazy to see. As are these wildlife crossings. They're man-made bridges used by animals like bears and cougars to safely cross the highway. It's an interesting fusion between the natural and modern world. As is driving your car into the mountains to hike up one, which is exactly what Christian and I were there to do. A day in the mountains is like a year anywhere else. You get all 4 seasons. Hot and sunny one moment could take a sharp turn, and when the great clouds started rolling in, we knew we had to get off the mountain quick. Oh. Even with the shitty weather, I was still looking forward to my trip down memory lane. We visited Lake Louise, where I worked for a summer when I was 19. I actually spent my remaining teenage days there. It's also where I lost my virginity. That summer would shape my entire future. My career, my romantic relationships, my entire lifestyle really. It all came out of that summer. But you know, as amazing as that summer was, and as much as I grew from that experience, it was the past. And what with COVID and the weather, it didn't feel the same. Now was the time to start thinking of the future. Which I did here, sitting next to Christian by the river in Golden, BC. We just stopped there for a quick break, but sitting next to the sounds of the river got me thinking. Maybe I should move back out west and go to school. Maybe now is the right time to get my master's degree. It's something I always planned to do, and with the economy being what it was, maybe now is the right time. It was just a thought, but at that point my future could be anything. And that was exciting to realize. We kept driving after that until it got dark. At that point, we pulled into a campsite and had a fire. In Kelowna, Christian and I stayed at his friend's place, another fellow musician who let us sleep in his recording studio basement, which was pretty cool. But since they hadn't seen each other in a while, I let them catch up and went off on my own to do some hiking. Besides enjoying the view, I spent that entire hike thinking about the video you're watching now. At that point, I had no idea what story I was even trying to tell. Most of the time I was just filming random things and occasionally talking to this video camera I bought just before leaving. I've always been a huge movie nerd and used to watch a new movie every day as a form of therapy. That is until I got really into traveling, which became my new form of therapy. Movies are travel. It's about experiencing a different reality and seeing things from a different perspective. The more you do that, the more you put your own problems into perspective. Also, the more you realize that by getting a slightly different mindset, tweaking your behavior, and making a choice you haven't before, there's no limits to the life you can live. And if you think of your life as a movie, you're not just the main character in it, you're also the writer and director. You tell yourself what to say, what to do, where to go. And then I realized that's the story I wanted to tell, regardless of who would watch it. I just had no idea what the end would be. So I ran down the mountain to keep figuring that out, which in a freaky way would foreshadow things to come. We continued driving west, this time with Christian behind the wheel. We drove until we hit the Pacific Ocean. We would need to take the ferry from there, but first, we would have a friendly reminder of the times we were living in. There was no escaping that. Luckily, we were prepared. We made our way to Vancouver Island, where Christian would be playing 3 different gigs with the Steadies over the next few nights. The first gig was scheduled in Duncan on the evening we arrived, or so we thought. When we arrived at the Duncan showroom, the owner, an unforgettable man named Longevity John, informed us we arrived a day early and the show wasn't until tomorrow. Well, we weren't expecting that. We were both open to see where a free night would take us, which at first took us on an epic run through the rainforest. It was like being in a video game. It then took us to his friend's place from Saskatchewan, who conveniently lived nearby. This turned out to be one of the more pleasant surprises of the trip. His friends were this super lovely and genuine couple who lived in this amazing home looking out over the ocean. The house was just so full of warmth, and you could tell it was exactly where they were meant to be, where they were living their truest life. They even had a little garden in the backyard, which we ate some fresh berries and edible flowers out of. It's hard to describe, but I could feel their sense of belonging with this place, and I realized that's what I wanted. Not to live in a small town on Vancouver Island and grow a garden, but the feeling of being exactly where I'm meant to be and to be completely content with that. You don't meet people living that way too often, and especially when you do. And of course, they let us spend the night. The following morning, we headed back into Duncan, which was a really unique little town, wrestling between its indigenous heritage, progressive ideals, and small town mindset. As Christian and I sat in one of the coffee shops in town, a group of older local men sat down with us. I don't think it was so much hate as it was ignorance, but they took immediate attention of Christian. They started asking about his hair and his nose, where he's originally from, all sort of thinly veiled racist comments. It was really awkward, but Christian's such an easygoing guy, he just laughed it off and zinged them back a couple of times. I talked to him about it afterwards, having not really discussed race or racism up until that point. He told me it was similar to living in northern Saskatchewan, and things some of the rural farmers would say to him. It's not my place to tell this story, nor would I be able to even if I tried. But it was a reminder that my lifestyle and beliefs do come from my background and experiences. And while I do fundamentally believe in the freedom to live the life we want, I should also recognize that it's not always as easy for others as it's been for me. And like that, it was time for the show. The Duncan showroom, the venue the band was playing in, was like nothing I've ever seen before. It was almost like an antique shop. And while it was used for live music, there was no bar on property. Even more interesting, long before COVID, they were live streaming their shows to YouTube, a practice that transitioned well into the current state of the world. Luckily, they were still allowing a few people inside to watch. We just had to spread out. This was the first of 3 shows I'd watched at the Steadies.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
We made our way to Victoria after the show, where I would spend the night sleeping in my van near downtown. That first night we visited a ship friend who was in town, which was interesting to hear someone else's story dealing with COVID and the industry shutdown. In what could be a movie of its own, she had reconnected with her ex-boyfriend who she was with before joining ships years ago. They fell back in love and were now living together. She was using this time to rediscover who she was as a person separate from ship life, something that's only possible to fully understand if you've lived that lifestyle as well. Our second night there, Christian and the Steadies played another show, this time at someone's house in Spa, looking out over the ocean. The energy of this place was incredible, and it was so great to see people dancing again. next day, we left for the third and final show in Tofino. This time, they weren't just there to play a show, but record a music video as well.
Just wanna be loved by you. So we can do what two lovers do. We'll do what two lovers do.
Afterwards, the music video moved to the beach. The band and their friends, including yours truly, sat around a campfire on the beach singing their song 2 over and over again as the cameramen filmed around us. We even had free beer. It was sweet. The following morning, we drove down the road to Ucluete, where Christian had a friend with a boat who took us on a tour of the harbor. And what harbor tour would be complete without freshening up in the ocean?
You got it? Never had to do that. But this makes you stink too, eh? Sitting in a vehicle.
Christian's friend was also from Saskatchewan. And like his friends we stayed at near Duncan, he was also out there living his truest life. Surfing, fishing, living off income from renting rooms in his house. This was the place he was meant to be. On our drive to Nanaimo the following day, we made a short roadside stop with Wi-Fi so Christian could make a call. That's not all we found there, though. In Nanaimo, we stayed with more of Christian's friends from Saskatchewan. They were musicians who would also tell us how happy they were there and how they never felt more at home. Vancouver Island is really magical like that. There's such a strong connection between the land and the people living on it. A feeling I'm sure existed for thousands of years among the indigenous communities. But how couldn't it? An island formed 150 million years ago by volcanoes and glaciers, with ancient forests and trees that have been grown for 800 years? That's when the Mongol Empire was formed and the Magna Carta was written. Throughout every major historical event since then, every war, every human atrocity, every invention or cultural milestone, every formation or change of our country's borders, these trees slowly grew, completely unaware of any of it. Even the younger trees reach into the sky. The experiences I had and the people I met on Vancouver Island were incredible. But it was time to head back to the mainland. And it couldn't have been better weather for it. The sea was so calm it was almost hypnotic. I would end up spending a few nights in Vancouver catching up with old friends. I used to live there around 10 years ago with my ex-boyfriend. It was a really different time for me when I tried to embrace my gay side, for lack of a better word. It didn't really take though in terms of lifestyle. I just found over time I was trying to conform to another identity that still wasn't really me, and it was taking me down a path that I didn't necessarily want to go. Don't get me wrong, I had a great time living there and loved the friends I made, but it took many more years of self-discovery before I could comfortably and confidently state with anyone listening that I'm me. I've slept with both men and women, I've dated both men and women, and I've been in love with both men and women. But that's still not who I am. That's just who I've been with. I'm the type of person who likes having new experiences, who wants to live in a minivan for the summer, whose favorite moments are usually when I'm connecting with another person, who struggles with anxiety and depression but does whatever I can to overcome it, who enjoys movies, traveling, exercising, and having some drinks. That's who I am. My sexuality is just a part of that. But like I said, it took me many years, some of them quite dark, to get to this point. And my time in Vancouver was a major part of that journey, connecting my past to my present. Just like it would be a major part of this journey, because it's where I would say goodbye to Christian, and several days later, I would say hello again to Trent. It's also the only time of the trip I slept in a Walmart parking lot. That's a little van life secret to be aware of. Most Walmarts allow you to do that. And then like that, Christian was gone. I left Vancouver searching for more solo adventures, but I'd be back. Like I said, I'd be saying hello to Trent again soon. We kept in touch after I left Calgary and decided to travel together. He was going to meet me in Vancouver in a few days, which gave me just enough time to explore somewhere I'd never heard of until recently. A place the guitarist from the Steadies told me was the most beautiful place in the world. The Sunshine Coast.
The way we go to the sound of the stereo, have me singing that na 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 na, singing that na 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 na. We're riding to the beat train, the way we go to the sound of the stereo, have me singing that na 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 na, singing that na 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 na. How to assure you, adore you.
I got there just in time to watch an incredible sunset. I was able to park my van right by the ocean for the night, and it was incredible. While chilling by the ocean the following morning, a local lady told me how the Sunshine Coast was the Hawaii of Canada. She also told me about a place called the Squamish Narrows. It's a place where the tide forces mass amounts of water through the Narrows each day, forming rapids. It's sometimes claimed to be the fastest tidal rapids in the world. Depending on the direction of the tide, it either causes these giant whirlpools that I saw, or when it goes the other direction, it causes massive waves you can apparently surf on. That would have been cool to see, but unfortunately, I was on the tide schedule, as well as the ferries. To get to the end of the road, I had to cross a bit more water first. But hey, I wasn't complaining.
Riding to the beat train, the way we go to the sound of the stereo, have me singing that na 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 na, singing that na 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 na. How to assure you, adore you.
The next day I rented a kayak to explore the coast some more. At one point I looked down and noticed I was surrounded by jellyfish, which was incredible and a little concerning in case I fell in. Luckily I had a guardian, but he didn't want to pose for long. And if the Sunshine Coast is really the Hawaii of Canada, then a trip to it wouldn't be complete without going for a swim, even if it wasn't white sand beaches. After my swim, I drove up one of the old dirt logging roads and pulled over to the side to spend the night. Why would I sleep at the side of a random dirt road, you ask? Because it was right next to this lake. The following morning, I decided to hike to the top of Tin Hat Mountain. The views were stunning along the way, but it was nothing compared to being at the top.
Holy shit.
I spent the next hour and a half relaxing and taking it all in. Who's to say what the most beautiful place in the world is? But the Sunshine Coast certainly didn't disappoint. The next day I was back in Vancouver to meet with Trent. I knew Trent for an afternoon several weeks ago while passing through Calgary. But with everything that happened this year, my renewed philosophy on life was to embrace opportunities as they present themselves and take it all as it comes. So when it was obvious Trent was seriously up to joining me on the road, I thought, great, let's see where this goes. Luckily, he felt the same way. Our first day together pretty much sums up the type of guy Trent is. I'm really big on exercising and jogging, so I selfishly asked if he was interested in jogging around the seawall with me, not really putting any thought into his experience level. Without saying a word, the guy runs alongside me for 10 kilometers around Stanley Park. I'm of course completely in my own world, enjoying the beautiful views along the way. We even saw a seal at one point, sunbathing by the Lionsgate Bridge. It wasn't until after that I realized how much he was injuring himself to do this with me. The poor guy was limping for the next few days. Yet, he never complained, because that's just the kind of guy he is.
Back to mine, I say, baby, I want you to stay.
That night we camped on his buddy's front lawn in the city, which led to our next adventure together. His buddy invited us to a COVID-friendly but secret gathering outside of Squamish. I won't go into any more detail beyond that, because I said I wouldn't. But before we left, Vancouver gave us one more story that I am going to share. You probably can't tell what's happening in this picture, and I hid the guy's face out of respect. But this dude who was staying at Trent's friend's house got so messed up that after throwing up in the bathroom sink, he decided to clean it out with his finger. Not sure what his thought process was, but I do know he would come to regret it after his finger got stuck in the drain. Apparently it was like a Chinese finger trap. I wouldn't have even thought that was possible, but after hours of trying to remove it with anything they could find, including sex lube, paramedics were called in to rescue him. That's what you're seeing in this picture taken at 7 a.m. I wouldn't have believed it if I wasn't there, but hey, that's 2020 for you. After leaving Vancouver for the second time, Trent and I made our way into the mountains near Squamish, in grizzly country to be exact, where the paved roads and Wi-Fi signals end. I wish I could tell you why we were there, but I'm sworn to secrecy. It's nothing sexual though, if that's what you weirdos are thinking. What I can share though is what we got up to during the day with the greatest gift we could have received when in Vancouver. We named her Carmen. The next day we drove to Canada's only desert. Carmen came with us, of course. After only a few days together, it was obvious that Trent was a genuinely nice guy who was always up for some fun and adventure. And while I was still feeling a little romantically reserved, what with a bad breakup earlier this year, and the identity crisis I unfortunately still go through whenever I start dating a guy, I was really happy to have him there with me, and was excited to see what we could get up to in Osoyoos, known for having one of Canada's warmest lakes. As it turned out, that would be one of the most memorable nights of the trip, because we found this little road that drove right out onto the lake. Even cooler is you could park on the side of it and spend the night. From there, we could go for a swim, or even better, a float.
I say, baby, I want you to stay. I really don't want you to leave. You got me begging, darling, please.
It was great, as was our sleeping arrangement for the night. Unfortunately, as the night went on, the wind got stronger and the air got colder. Not the romantic, let's keep each other warm kind of cold, but the kind of cold where you're awake all night shivering and trying to shelter yourself from the constant, never-ending wind. Of course, the sun eventually rose, and with that, the air warmed and the wind died. It had been a long and cold night, but waking up the next morning to this incredible view made it all worthwhile. So yeah, no complaints. That day we drove somewhere that meant a lot to Trent. On our first date, while floating down the Bow River, he asked me if there's any one place in the world that was uniquely special to me, and after thinking about it, there really wasn't. I was a global traveler who was always looking for the next destination. For Trent, however, he had Fernie, a resort town in southern BC that he had been visiting his entire life. His family had a condo there at the base of the Fernie Alpine Resort, a major ski hill in the wintertime, but used for other activities in the summertime. Activities that would forever change my life. It started with a chairlift. Then it turned to mountain biking, but only for Trent, not for me. I just went for the view, but then we decided to run a race. It was part of a series of trail races happening that summer that Trent had already taken part in, where you race others up and down the mountain as fast as you can. It was a challenge I was definitely up for, or so I thought. Running up the mountain was hard. Very, very hard. So hard that I either had to start walking or puke and pass out. So I started walking the remaining way up alongside Trent. But being the guy that I am, that meant I had to make up for lost time on the way down, because I really don't like to lose. So I started running downhill as fast as possible, leaving Trent behind. Things were going good until about 500 meters from the finish line. It was the final slope, and I approached it at full speed, not properly gauging the steepness and length of it. At first it was fine, but my weight shifted forward and gravity started kicking in. Without any control, I started running faster and faster. I honestly don't think I've ever ran that fast in my life. There's really more controlled falling than anything. That is, till I lost control. I felt my feet come out from under me, and my natural instinct was to try rolling into the fall to minimize the damage. In theory, that was a good idea, but not so much in practice. My shoulder ended up hitting the ground at full speed and force. I got up to keep running, but could immediately tell something was wrong. I reached back and could feel my bone popped out of place. All of a sudden, I couldn't hang my right arm anymore, and needed to lift it up with my left arm. Of course, the race was still going on, so people started running past me and stopping as soon as they saw something was wrong. But there wasn't anything anyone could do for me, so I told them to keep running and just finish the race on my own. My arm was messed up, but my legs still worked fine. When I crossed the finish line, it was to a round of applause. After explaining what happened, the staff got me a sling, which Trent helped put on. Trent, then being the superhero that he is, borrowed someone's bike and rode it back to the condo to get my van and drive me to the hospital. In the meantime, I just waited on a patio and drank a beer. Trent got me to the Fernie hospital and waited for me until I got released. They took x-rays and told me my shoulder was severely separated. I would later find out on an injury scale of 1 to 5, it was a solid 5, as in, all the tendons and ligaments were completely torn, and my shoulder was no longer pointing in the right direction. Unfortunately, there wasn't much they could do for me there, besides advising me to see a specialist in a major city, giving me a better sling, and providing me with disinfectant wipes to clean my wounds. I was so lucky to have had Trent there. He picked me up from the hospital and drove me back to his condo, where he cooked me dinner, prepared the bed in a way that I could sleep on it, and personally cleaned all my wounds and scrapes because I couldn't reach them myself. Trent then drove me to Calgary the next day as smoothly as possible. The route took us past the town of Frank, which got buried in 1903 by a massive landslide. Dozens of bodies still lay under the 110 million tons of limestone that slid down from the mountain. My second reminder in 2 days of the dangers of mountains and gravity, and also an important reminder of the unpredictable fragility of life and inevitable certainty of death. Whatever choices you make in life, when your time comes, it comes. I hurt myself running up and down a mountain. These people got crushed to death going about their lives below. Some people might find that scary. I find it weirdly liberating. Back in Calgary, Trent took me to the hospital where I was able to see a specialist. He told me how severe the injury was and that I would need surgery for it to heal properly. 2 surgeries, to be exact. One at the earliest opportunity to insert a metal plate that would reconnect my shoulder to my collarbone, and a second surgery 3 months later to have the metal plate removed. I wouldn't have full use of my right arm until then. It wasn't the best news, but the only choice I had now was how to react to it. So I chose to stay positive. And after 2 days of waiting around the hospital, staring up at the gift my friend Aaron brought me, they finally got me into surgery. I was in the middle of saying something to the doctor when everyone's voice got really slow and the room went dark. When I opened my eyes again, my surgery was complete and I was being pumped full of painkillers. For some reason, I apologized to the nurse for my rude behavior while in surgery. I'm not sure why, seeing as I was asleep the entire time and being cut open, but I just had this overwhelming feeling of guilt. A feeling that would wear off and turn to drug-induced euphoria over the next few hours. It made staring up at my new friend much more enjoyable. I got released the next morning, rocking my new post-surgery look. The only question now was where was I going to stay? I wouldn't be able to drive for weeks, and my van wasn't the most comfortable thing to sleep in under the best of circumstances. Luckily, I had met Trent. After one day floating down a river and 1 week on the road, we were now living together.
What are we? Those are buds. Should buy Caesars. Oh, that's sick.
Health is key.
Ooh.
Fancy.
I was pretty useless the first few days after my injury and surgery, and I'll be forever grateful for the unconditional support Trent gave. And it wasn't just the physical support with things I could no longer do on my own, but the constant emotional support. I could have so easily slipped into a depressed state. Everything became a struggle, and even with the surgery, there was no guarantee my shoulder would ever fully heal. But thanks to Trent, I got past the first hurdle and kept getting better from there. I quickly adjusted to my new life as a left-handed man.
Never thought the day would ever come. Legalization across our land. It is our time to live as one. Won't let corruption take it from our hands. Everybody light your fire and pass it on to the tail of the lion. That will rise up higher and higher and pass it on to the tail of the lion.
A week after surgery, it was time for my bandages to come off. Ow!
Gross.
It's goopy. Ow! Ooh.
Oh, it's gross. It's...
It is gross.
Ow!
I mean, I feel like you're gonna have to change the parental guidance rating on your documentary to PG-13 now.
Oh, but I have a lot of footage of me sleeping with hookers in my van, so it's been there a while ago.
Ow!
How's that look?
Not bad.
Oh,
Looks like
what's this?
no picking.
Ew, it's goopy. Ew. Ew. Ew,
Please
even I'm
don't.
grossed out by this.
Please tell me I can stop filming now.
It's not body, so that's good. Ah, that's gnarly, eh? Big gash on my shoulder that will be there forever.
Not forever.
As I continued healing my right arm and strengthening my left arm, I followed Trent around as he went about his life.
Hey, baby, I want you to stay. I really don't want you to leave. You got me begging, darling, please.
A little over 3 weeks after my injury, the sling was finally able to come off. Then the real work began.
I did it.
It looks like it's becoming easier and easier.
It is getting easier, but it's still very, very painful. Yeah!
It is a conspiracy. We have to stop him.
You're mistaken.
Don't take me. Ask him.
Eventually, I was able to properly wear a shirt again for the first time in a while, although taking it off still proved challenging. The more I recovered, the closer Trent and I got. We met each other's friends, watched tons of movies together, became super competitive at the board game Carcassonne, and went on a bunch of smaller adventures, whether that be hikes, river floats, COVID-friendly drinking. And of course, we talked about our relationship status. Things were going great between us, but as much as I hate to admit this, I was still carrying a lot of baggage from my past relationships. It had gotten to the point where I began associating the word love with manipulation, like it's a word people say when they want to use you and just have you be okay with it, or a word people say when they mistreat you but want you to feel guilty for being upset. And being in a relationship is just a way for people to make you more committed to them than they are to you. And I obviously know that's not true, and I know I've just had some bad experiences, but how could I start using these words again when that's still how I felt? And yet, Trent had done more than any other person I've dated to show me how much he cared, and we weren't even saying those words. And I felt it, and I appreciated it, and I really wanted to reciprocate it. I just needed to know it wasn't circumstances that brought us together, that I wasn't just there because I fell down a mountain, and the only way I could do that was to complete the journey I started almost 3 months earlier. My shoulder was finally good enough to drive again, and while the Northern Territories still weren't fully open and the Arctic Ocean wasn't reachable by road, I could still drive north. I said my temporary goodbyes to Trent and hit the road. The goal was to head to northern Alberta in search of the Northern Lights, a major life goal of mine I had yet to accomplish, and one I wasn't originally expecting to accomplish this trip. The shoulder recovery sent me back several weeks from when I was originally planning on heading north, which now brought me right into Aurora Borealis season. For the first night back on the road, I drove to Lesser Slave Lake and parked at the end of a dirt road by the water. The bald eagle flying overhead when I stepped out of the van was a good indication that I was back into nature. I set myself up by the giant lake I'd never heard of before and waited for it to get dark. I passed the time working out my shoulder, which was still a long way to a full recovery, and then watched the day turn into night. Staring up at the sky at a desolate lake looking for the northern lights sounds like a dream come true. And it is. But there's one thing that I didn't think of leading up to this. And that was being in the pitch dark, in the cold, in bear country, all by myself. For hours. That was a little spooky, and after 3.5 hours of no success, I decided I felt safer huddled for warmth in my van. Another thought that never occurred to me was the possibility of not seeing the northern lights at all, and since they randomly appear on their own schedule, that was a real possibility. But the further north you go, the better the chances, so further north I went. It had now been 10,000 kilometers on the road since I left Ottawa, a milestone that was less climactic than I was hoping for. That night I drove to another lake I'd never heard of before, near Fort McMurray, Gregoire Lake, and it didn't disappoint.
sure you filmed it on your phone. When the sky was all purple, I could see we're almost home. That's always when we reminisce about the starry nights and the girls you'd wanna kiss. So after a tired long ride, we went our separate ways for the very last time.
What did disappoint was the weather that night. All I could do was huddle for warmth in my van, staring out the window at a cloud-filled sky. There would be no northern lights that night either. The following day, though, well, that was a completely different story. I decided to take advantage of the forecast showing a full day of clear blue skies and head even further north. But first I had to do something I hadn't done since much warmer temperatures, and clean myself in the freezing cold lake. I had no destination in mind that day except north. I had a tank full of gas and a road ahead of me I was going to keep driving on until I was somewhere. Which turned out to not only be after the paved road ended, but the actual end of the road itself. The only way to go any further north would be winter when the lakes and swamps freeze and you can drive over them. From there, I turned down a small side road by the barrier. A bumpy road made purely of sand, something my minivan was not well equipped for. I was worried about getting stuck out there alone when I saw a truck and camper van parked in a field off the road. That would be my northern home for the next couple nights, with neighbors that would define my stay, but I'll get to that in a bit. My first thought was to explore the surrounding area. My second thought was how many bears and wolves I knew were in this area. Luckily, I had my bell. Apparently that sound warns bears that you're coming and scares them off, so I jingled it everywhere I went, which turned out to be a smart idea because I found bear tracks shortly afterwards. My van now seemed much further away. In the end, I got back without issue, but my neighbors hadn't yet returned, which was fine. I didn't mind waiting. By the time my neighbors got back, it was already dark. They lit a giant fire, cracked their beers, and started preparing their moose meat dinner. They were a group of moose hunters working in Fort Mac. 2 were brothers and 2 were brothers-in-law. All 4 of them came from the same town in Newfoundland. The first question they asked me was if I was a serial killer. When I assured them I wasn't, they gave me a beer and invited me to join. That was a bit of a game changer. They even gave me a nickname.
Cheers, Ottawa!
Thank you. They tended the fire, fed me, got me drunk. That may have played a role in what happened next. That was a propane tank. An action shot I luckily got from 2 angles. And then again in slow motion. Those guys were great, and meeting them was such a treat. They even invited me to join them deeper in the woods the next day, which would mean getting up at dawn. Luckily I didn't go to bed early though, because drunk at 1 in the morning, this started to happen in the sky. I don't care that my photography skills suck. I don't care how cold it was or how little sleep I got that night. That was one of the best moments of my life. I was having so much fun partying with the newfies that it didn't even matter to me that I didn't see the northern lights. But then like that, they appeared. They lit up the entire sky for an hour. They swirled and danced. It was like the light was alive. And maybe it was the alcohol, but I actually teared up from joy. Something I've wanted to see my entire life was happening in front of my eyes in a random field at the end of the road in northern Alberta. That could have been the end of my northern adventure, but life had more in store. We left at sunrise and headed deeper into the woods, riding on the back of their quads. We arrived at a little clearing in the woods, looking down over a moose-filled river. But more space was needed. From there, they could get to work. While they worked, I watched over the fire and enjoyed the view. I also did something I'd never done before, and that probably wasn't the best thing for my shoulder. But hey, when in Rome. Did I look manly? After a day of hard work, their project was complete. They now had a permanent campsite to spend the cold nights while hunting. We of course drank beer and joked around the entire time. They were nice guys, proud of where they were from and where they were now living. Northern Alberta has a bad rap because of the oil sands, but there was a lot of beauty to find in the area. Of course, there was the other part of it as well, but the locals I met there showed me a side of Canada I hadn't experienced before, and it's an experience I'll never forget. It was now time to head back south. I had one final destination to visit before my road trip would be complete, and one amazing final drive to get there.
I woke up on a Monday, it was a nice day, not a cloud in the sky. So I walked outside to see what was coming my way. Some people walked by, so I said hi. Then I got high. Said, hey, yellow ball in the sky, how should I pass my time? I said, I don't have a cent to my name, but I can sure use a dime. I got all this time to kill, so don't throw me the lifeline. I said my day goes on and on. My mind's at ease when the day is done. Instead of hurrying away, you beat your jury for the day that's begun. I woke up, my friend was inside. Oh, did nothing wrong, but now he couldn't get by. He said, officer, officer, could I please make a call? Standing all alone. Oh, he went up to the telephone, but it was dead on the line. Oh, how could he pass his time? Hey, hey, hey. He said, I don't have a cent to my name, but I can sure use a dime. I've got all this time to kill, so don't throw me the lifeline. I said my day goes on and on. My mind's at ease when the day is done. Instead of hurrying away, maybe your jury for the day that's begun. So, what's your story? This train's bound for glory. This train's bound for glory. This train's bound for glory. So, what's your story now? This train's bound for glory now. This train's bound for glory now. This train's bound for glory now. Every day that you wake up, embrace all that's graced us, and the challenges that face us, we take them in stride. Every day that you wake up, embrace all that's graced us. Oh, and the challenges that face us, we take them in stride. So,
Summer was over and things had changed, but my final destination would be a familiar one, a place my real journey began 12 years earlier. With the help of a friend still working for Fairmont, I booked a discounted night at the Fairmont Chateau Lake Louise. But I wouldn't be alone. Trent was there officiating a wedding. A good friend of his he hadn't seen in years asked him to do it. We all stayed there together. After a night of fancy drinks and delicious food, we woke up the next morning to beautiful blue skies and a mountain begging to be climbed. I may not have made it to the Arctic Ocean and jumped in the water like I originally planned, but plans change. And whenever you set out on an adventure, one way or the other, you'll end up somewhere. And if you keep moving, eventually that place will be exactly where you want to be. And in this case, I still found freezing cold water to jump into.
Holy shit. I did it. That was that.
After the hike and swim, I drove back to Calgary. It had been almost 12,000 kilometers since I initially set forth on this journey 3 months earlier. I hung around Trent's place for a few more days before flying home to Ottawa. It was now October and all the leaves had changed colors. But besides that, not much else had changed. We were still in the middle of the COVID pandemic, along with all the various restrictions, something I was reminded of every day on the road. While the world may not have changed, my circumstances did, as did my attitude to my current situation. I was miserable when I left. I felt like nothing was going right in my life, and I felt helpless to do anything about it. But that was at the start of summer, and summer was now over. While recovering at Trent's place, 65 days after leaving Ottawa, I was accepted to a master's program at the University of Calgary, beginning in January. That's why I flew home to Ottawa, to pick up some remaining things at my parents' house before flying back to Calgary where Trent and my van were waiting. I just got back yesterday and decided to take the van out for a ride. My second surgery is coming up soon, to have the metal plate removed from my shoulder. The doctor said there's no guarantee it'll ever be fully healed, but that's life. I don't know what will happen from there, but I'm ready to find out, and I'm ready to jump into it with both feet. It was advised to avoid non-essential travel at this time, but I've long since learned that only you can decide what's essential to you and your happiness. That's your choice and your choice alone, and you have less and less time to make it with each passing day. To quote a few of my favorite movies, on a long enough timeline, the survival rate for everyone drops to 0. You can either get busy living or get busy dying. Because every man dies, not every man really lives. Or who knows, maybe I'm just irresponsible.
You know, with this video, I really didn't want to make a travel blog or a vacation reel. And I didn't want to drive across the country just for a vacation. This year has been rough, to say the least. I've traveled a lot before. You know, sometimes you're looking for that epiphany, that moment where it's just like, this is who I am, or this is what I need to do with my life, or this is what I need to be happy. And I find it never comes that way. There's never that moment where it's just the light bulb goes off. Instead, it's this gradual thing, so gradual that you don't even notice it until you look back at the beginning before you started traveling or before you started some new project. And you look back to when you started to where you are now, and you realize how much you've grown, and you realize that all the perspective you gained, all the confidence you gained. You're all of a sudden this much bigger person, even though you didn't even feel it happen. It's just where you are. You know, I'm a big fan of the movie Into the Wild, but that's not what this is. This isn't Into the Wild. I'm not a survivalist. I don't hate society. I love society. You know, as messed up as people are, I think what makes life worth living is us all figure it out together. You know, you can only get so much growth sitting by a lake by yourself. And it's really when it comes to the human connection and interacting with each other that we really start to find out who we are. And then the more we do that, the more we become happy. I don't really know what the point of all this rambling sentence was. I just know what I'm looking for. It's probably not on the road, but I'm hoping I will find it driving down the road. As poetic and corny as that was.
I woke up on a Monday. It was a nice day. Not a cloud in the sky, so I walked outside to see what was coming my way. Some people walked by, so I said hi. Then I got high. Said, hey, yellow ball in the sky, how should I pass my time? I said, I don't have a cent to my name, but I can show you the dime. I got all this time to kill, so don't throw me the lifeline. I said my day goes on and on. My mind's at ease when the day is done. Instead of hurrying away, you beat your jury for the day that's begun. I woke up, my friend was inside. Oh, did nothing wrong, but now he couldn't get by. He said, officer, could I please make a call? To my name, but I can show you the dime. I've got all this time to kill, so don't throw me the lifeline. I said my day goes on and on. My mind's at ease when the day is done. Instead of hurrying away, maybe your jury for the day that's begun. So, what's your story? This train's bound for glory. This train